In the first months of 2024, Fujifilm will release more cameras than in the entirety of 2023. Counting both the X and the GFX system, we had the XS20 and the GFX 100 Mark II, so brace yourselves for at least 3 new cameras. Today I'm gonna dig a little deeper into which cameras are the most likely to be upgraded. This surprises me in the sense that this camera is actually still very popular, very hard to find, and secondhand it actually goes for more than its MSRP, as it is a huge hype for people on TikTok and other social medias. But it was leaked that its successor will arrive early next year, which will most likely be the X100R, short for Roku, which means 6 in Japanese. There are a couple of features that surely will get changed or rather updated, but I don't expect Fujifilm to make drastic changes to this camera, as this camera is a recipe that works incredibly well for them. So here's what I think they will actually change. The predecessor to the X100V was the X100F, and it used to feature this D-pad, which a lot of high spec cameras do have still. But with the X100V, because they wanted to go very minimal, they removed the D-pad, and I think they will bring it back, because not only can you go through all the menus with it, but you can also assign all the buttons on the D-pad as function buttons, and I think that is just too valuable to leave out, and I think a lot of people have maybe not complained, but they asked Fuji to bring that back. So I think the D-pad will be something that will be back with the X100R. Then I assume they'll do something that is quite obvious. They will change the sensor to the X-Trans 5 sensor with 40 megapixels, something they have already done on the XH2 and XT5. I would assume they will also bring the new processor to the camera, which is something I think they have done with every new camera in 2022 and 23, because that just gives you a way better working experience, because everything is way quicker. And something I assume they will do is a great improvement for the camera overall. The camera is currently weather resistant, but only if you put a filter on the lens. And I think they will make the camera fully weather resistant. I don't know if they have changed something with the lens for that. I don't know if it's possible to have it in such a small lens, but the 27mm pancake lens that is for the interchangeable lens cameras also has weather resistance. So I assume they will also do that on the X100R. There have been rumors, speculations, or maybe just hopes from people that Fujifilm will change the lens on this camera, but I don't think they will change it in any drastic way other than the previously mentioned weather resistance. I can just not see Fujifilm change the focal length of this camera away from the current 23mm, and for the aperture I don't think they can change anything, because f2 is probably the lowest they can go, because the lens is just so small. So I don't think they will change anything drastic, because as the saying goes, never change a running system. That leaves us with a couple more cameras that are due an upgrade. There are, as far as I know, unconfirmed rumors about one more camera that will be upgraded. The Fujifilm X Pro 3, probably one of the most logical and most anticipated upgrades out there. I myself have kind of a sweet spot for rangefinder style cameras and would love to get my hands on the X Pro 3 successor at some point, but I already have my Fujifilm X-T4, which is already quite a hybrid camera. So I just don't really see how I could justify fitting that rangefinder style camera into my lineup, but the X Pro 4 is definitely a camera that I would one day love to test and check out and maybe own myself. Pretty sure, even though currently it's an unconfirmed rumor, that the X Pro 4 is one of the cameras that will be released in the early months of 2024, because its predecessor, the X Pro 3, was released back in November of 2019. All the other top-of-the-line cameras in the Fujifilm X system, like the XT and XH line, have been upgraded since then. On the X Pro 3 has been left waiting. Here are some things that I think they will change on this camera. Firstly, starting with the highly controversial tilt-down screen on the X Pro 3 that Fujifilm introduced to combat, or maybe rather help people to focus on the moment of taking the picture, rather than taking the picture, checking the screen, checking the image, and then retaking the exact same picture. In principle, it's an awesome thing that a camera manufacturer dares to try this on a camera, though for a lot of people, apart from a very enthusiastic fan base, this screen just wasn't a success, rather a reason to skip the X Pro 3 altogether. I myself don't know if I would love to use the screen on the X Pro 3, but it's definitely a very daring move and something that is probably a lot of fun to have as a backup camera just for street and travel photography. But I think Fujifilm will roll back to the usual 3-way tilting screen to be able to just catch a bigger fan base for this camera, much to the detriment of this very niche fan base. And as the X Pro line is kind of a top line of the Fujifilm X system, I think they will also upgrade the sensor to the 40 megapixel X Trans 5 sensor, as well as upgrading its processor to the new X Processor 5 for an overall better and faster experience. As it is a confirmed rumor that at least 3 cameras will be released in the first months of 2024, there's at least one more to go, if not more. There are still way more cameras that are due an upgrade, but I think it's pretty safe to say that it's not going to be the XT or the XH, nor the XT30 Mark II line, as these cameras have been upgraded within the last 2 years. There are 2 cameras that do spring to mind that are very much due an upgrade. First of all, the Fujifilm X-E4, which was last upgraded from the X-E3 to the X-E4 back in March of 2021, as well as the GFX 50R, which is Fujifilm's only medium format rangefinder style camera and was released back in 2019. It turns out though the third camera was already leaked, and it's neither of those 2 cameras, as it is something that I think no one has expected really. Because the third camera that Fujifilm will release in the early months of 2024 will be the GFX 100S Mark II. I think most people, myself included, thought the GFX 100 with its enormous grip and the GFX 100S were actually merged into one camera with the newly released GFX 100 Mark II back in September of 2023. But it turns out Fujifilm will keep the GFX 100S line going. I unfortunately have no real clue what Fujifilm will change on this camera apart from the obvious. They'll probably put in the X Processor 5 just for a faster overall experience, as well as probably updating the EVF and the screen for just a higher frame rate and higher resolution. And maybe they will put in better video features in comparison to the GFX 100 Mark II, as the GFX 100S had slightly better video features than the GFX 100 back then, but honestly that's just far-fetched speculation on my side. Something that I could imagine though is that they're trying to bring out the GFX 100S Mark II as a slightly lower spec version of the GFX 100 Mark II. But honestly I can't really think of any other things that Fujifilm could change or I guess decrease, worsen on this camera to price it a significant amount beneath its competitors so it makes sense to buy this camera. So we can only wait and see what happens with this camera once it's announced with all of its specs and features. Anyway, since you're still watching, that probably means that you're a Fujifilm enthusiast and you might be interested in why I am and why I chose the Fujifilm X system over its competitors, especially full frame cameras, so check out this video right here.